Welcome to the RN2writer Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Haynes. I'm a nurse, but I made my living as a freelance writer, and today I help other nurses and honestly any kind of health professional start a writing business too. Hey, before I get started, don't forget to expand the description box on YouTube for links to any resources I might mention. You also can subscribe and click that notification bell so you'll know every time we post new content on YouTube, or if you prefer your information audio only. You can follow our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Lastly, don't forget to share this podcast with your nurse and clinician friends so they can get in on this great opportunity also. And today, joining us on the RN2writer Show is my friend and the very successful freelance writer, Amy Buttell. She is a journalist, ghostwriter, and content creator who helps executives, entrepreneurs, subject matter experts, and organizations leverage their knowledge into thought leadership. For the last quarter century, Amy has worked with Fortune 500 companies, startup founders, executive coaches, consultants, and many others to capture their words in a way that makes their ideas clear, substantial, and memorable. In 2023, one of her ghostwritten books hit the USA Today bestseller list. That's incredible. When she's not working on her business, you can find Amy teaching a meditation class, at the gym, or hanging out with her cats in Silver Spring, Maryland. And by the way, you can find Amy online at lakeeffectcreative.com. Welcome, Amy.
Welcome, Beth. It's great to be here.
Amy and I, for the audience, have known each other for about a decade.
Longer, maybe. It's frightening,
I think we've known of each other for longer, but we became pretty fast friends.
Yes.
10 years ago. And Amy writes in the financial sector. And so if y'all are wondering, why are you having like a non-healthcare writer on the show? Well, you're going to find out. So Amy, I was wondering if you could walk us through sort of briefly how you came to be a freelance writer and how you came to specialize in finance.
Sure. Well, I've always been a writer. So I worked, for like some nonprofits and newspapers and things like that when I came out of college. And then about 5 years after I got married, I had kids, and my ex-husband was a medical student and an intern and a resident. So we moved a lot, which meant that it just didn't make sense for me to try to work, especially since he was never home. So I thought somebody has to do everything around the house and take care of the kids. So I did that for 10 years, and it was, it had its wonderful moments and its frustrating moments, like the rest of life. But we were at a point when we moved to Erie, Pennsylvania, where I had been really involved in an organization that helps people form investment clubs. It's called the National Association of Investors Corporation. So I was in an investment club before I went to Erie, and then I wasn't in one, but I was still involved in the organization, and some opportunities. They had a magazine, and some opportunities just kind of arose for me to start doing some writing. And my kids were in school, and 10 and 7, I think, at that time, which tells you how old I am now, but let's try not to think about that. So I, just started kind of dipping my toes into like, what would this look like? And I really liked it. Because I've always been a writer. Like my dad was a writer. My kids are both involved in writing in different ways. So it's kind of like, in my DNA. So to like not do it, right, is almost painful. So this was a great way that I could write and start to make, like, I really wanted, like, the first check I got was $150. And it was, like 1999. So not even a lot of money then, but it was the first money I'd made in 10 years. So I wanted to frame it. And it's like, no, you need to actually take it to the bank. But
I'm just going to interrupt for a second to say it's amazing, though, that you remember that moment, and you remember exactly how much the check was, because when this happens to a person the first time, it blows your mind.
Yeah, even if it doesn't seem like very much money, you're still getting paid to do what you want to do, and that's like incredible. So from there, like basically for a couple years, I kept it. I just worked for that one organization, like doing things for their magazine, and they had a newsletter. And then I got involved in their mutual fund education program. So I was helping like produce content for that. And then I started around, so that was 1999, like around 2003, I started to think, oh, well, maybe I can do more with this. So I started to, like, I joined an organization that Beth and I were both in for a long time, Freelance Success. And, kind of started testing, like, what else could I do with this? So I started working for the Financial Planning Association. My big break was I got a little brief for the AARP magazine. That was like, right. And I think I got paid, I don't know, it was like 350 words and I made like $500, but that was my big consumer magazine break in, which at that time was a big deal before they were all dead, which is kind of what has happened now. But 20 years ago, they were still a big deal. So anyway, long story short, I ended up separating from my ex-husband, and then I had to get really serious in 2005. Like, I'm like, I have to, like, I have to make enough money to support myself and my kids. So I think in 2000, I think I doubled my income basically in 1 year. Like I made like 25,000 a year, which had been the most. And then the next year I jumped to 50 because like I had to do it. And it was at that time when I was going through my divorce and I just saw how many disadvantages, women, and especially women who had been in the home, what the financial disadvantages of coming from that place and then getting divorced, where the ex is likely to say, oh, well, she just wanted to do it. Like I wasn't necessarily in favor of her quitting her job, but she wanted to do it. Right. Because they all say that. Even it doesn't matter. Like you wish now you could go back in time and tape them and say they never said that. But anyway, so I thought I really wanted to help other women in the same situation because it's so difficult. Because like, you deserve more money. That you're like my ex-husband at the time we separated was literally making 10 times as much as I was. So like I had like 90 to 10 kind of disparate in our income. So I decided to go back to school I wanted to become a financial planner so I could help women, who were in that situation. Well, I kind of got a little bit sidetracked. I fell in love with accounting and I got an accounting certificate. And then the end of my academic career was when I failed the first part of the CPA exam by 1 point. And it was when my oldest son was a freshman in college. And I'm like, I have too many bills. Like I can't, my business was really successful because I kind of, between 2000 and this was before the financial crisis, right? I had experienced a real kind of, I went out and I really did a lot of marketing. And I was doing pretty well at that point. Then I did have, I remember, I think the second year of the financial crisis, over a year, I started losing all my clients, like one a month, another one. It was like, the paper cuts till by the end of the year, I'm like, I don't even know what I'm going to do because, and that happened to a lot of people because it was so bad. But fortunately, the next year it started coming back. And at one point, like I had, I think in a 3-month period, I got 3 anchor clients, like from referrals. And somebody's like, well, I saw your stuff and wondered if you wanted to. And I'm like, yes, please. So, I kind of came back from that. So I would say, and I've always, I do actually, the financial area is kind of like my bread and butter. Because of my accounting background, like I can read financial statements, and I understand what people are saying when they're like, oh yeah, the balance sheet, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, oh yeah, I can read a balance sheet, right? So it's easier for me, like business is natural because I understand, the basics and how companies make money. And, I've always kept up with had to keep up with current affairs for what I do. So, I can talk. And my joke is I love to hate the economy. For I think 9 years, I wrote economic commentary for a Fortune 500 company that went out to like hundreds of thousands of people. And of course, it was not in my name. It was in the name of the guy that I wrote for, but still, So I have a lot of credibility in that area, but I've also 5 years ago started working for the Medical Professional Liability Association, which is an association of insurers that do, malpractice insurance for you. If
Yeah.
you're a nurse at the bedside, and your hospitals and doctors, and then there's all sorts of hospitals that have their own self-insurance that are part of it. So that got me sort of more in, but it's really, it's a lot of risk, so it's not unfamiliar to me. And I also have some familiarity because my ex-husband was a doctor, right? And now I'm writing some books for the American Society of Healthcare Engineers, so this would be facilities managers. So I think my point, when at that, over time, my income, it was kind of, there's been some ebbing and flowing. I can't say that there haven't been slow times. There certainly have been. Like probably the most recent one was I moved here back to Maryland in 2019 to help my parents, and I did have kind of a slow year that year. And of course, we were all worried about the pandemic, and that completely turned out to be a non-event for me. In fact, a lot of people decided since they were stuck at home anyway, they might as well write a book while they were stuck at home.
I had my biggest year ever in 2020 because everyone wanted pandemic coverage.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that wasn't really a problem. So I would say for the past maybe 3 or 4 years, I've been either at 200,000 a year gross or over. And this year might be better.
Wow.
I mean, I'm a little worried about it because I bought an electric car. And if my net income, if my adjusted gross income is over $150,000, I'm going to have to pay back my tax credit.
Well, I think that a lot of people, though, would be willing to trade that. And
I know, exactly. People are like, don't make as much money. And I'm like, I can't not do that, because if people are offering me work and it's work I want to do and it's well paid, I'm just too much of a business owner, and I think that's the mentality, right? I mean, we think, oh, I'm a writer. It's like, well, I am a writer. I'm a writer. I'm not in the same, subset as your audience, but we're selling our writing.
Right.
And if we can't run a business, we should just get a job writing content for somebody that runs the business. Because this is about as much as running a business as it is about writing.
Absolutely. And first of all, it blows my mind, that you're up over 200,000. I know somebody else who is up over that this year or last year. Well, probably both, because once you reach those levels, you just tend to maintain them, as my experience. Yeah. But I find it funny from the standpoint that, in an effort, really, this is going to sound funny, I think, in an effort not to oversell the financial potential of this career, we say things like, you can make 100,000 a year doing this. Right. And we hear from nurses who say, well, I already make that because I work as a travel nurse and I take overtime and whatever. And I'm like, right. But what I'm trying to say is you can relatively easily hit that without going into work, without being on your feet all day, without working overtime. Yeah.
I work from my couch. Right. And I can work whatever hours I want to.
And
I do not work a lot of hours. I don't work 40 hours a week.
Oh, no.
Never.
The pandemic, never. I hit 152. I billed 152 in 2020, and that was the most I worked. And when I went back and calculated it, because I tracked my time, it was 30 hours a week in the office. And it's like, anyway, I would to talk about your book writing, because I think this is not anything that we teach at RN2writer, and I think it could be a really nice addition to a nurse writer's repertoire to do that type of ghosting that you do. Can you talk about how that works a little more, or how you got into it?
Well, yeah. I mean, and I think your point is a good one, because it's not just, my website is all about my book ghostwriting, because, those can be lucrative gigs, especially if I don't have to intermediate with an agency. So I focus on that, but it's just one service that I offer, right? And if you can offer that service, I think it's a huge benefit. So So actually, the first book that I wrote was published in 2001, and it was that organization I told you about. It was a mutual fund handbook. And I remember when I was working on it, I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Because I'm good. I'm organized, right? I'm good at keeping, like, this should go here, this should go there, this should go there. But I'm also good at sort of like the macro of seeing how it should fit together and keeping on track of all the little pieces. And no, this doesn't belong here. We should leave this out. So yeah, I mean, I really liked it, but then I just didn't have a lot of opportunities. Like, my work sort of went in another direction, and I'm like, I'm all about, like, I think one reason my business has been successful is I follow my audience, my customers, my clients, like whatever they want me to do. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, I do that, right? And if it's for a moment, it's not book ghost, who cares? As long as I'm making the money and working with, my thing is I like to work with smart people, the experts, and really help them get their points across, which a lot of times they're not sure how to do that, or they either can't write or they don't have the time to write. So I had more of an opportunity, I would say 2017, I got a referral to someone at this is a company that does, like, basically a lot of the broker, like, helps advisors, financial advisors, like, just sort of like intermediate with their customers in terms of, like, helping them find a custodian for assets, a trading platform, an investment platform. But anyway, they provide marketing services they wanted to provide, in their marketing services, they wanted to offer book ghostwriting. So we talked about it, and I started writing these books for financial advisors, which they're all about retirement income planning. And I've probably done 12 of them. And maybe there's 5 more that either were never published or haven't yet been published.
Wow.
So that was kind of my move into that. And then I got on with a more mainstream ghostwriting agency in 2018. And then the bestseller that you mentioned, started working on that in 2021. And now I'm doing a couple other books for them. And then I've had other opportunities that come up, like through referrals. And I mean, I like books because they're a long project. You can build more relationships with people when you're writing a book, because you really get to know them. And, like, I'm still friends. Like, the guys that I wrote the bestseller for, like, one of the authors, like, we talk every couple of months because we're good friends. Like, we really got to be good friends. I like it because the payouts tend to be bigger and over time, although you can get mixed up with, like, milestones, and the agencies always want to hold on to the money, right? So you have to be careful about that. But yeah, I like it. And there's a potential, like, really well compensated ghostwriters can make over 6 figures a book. I mean, I'm not there yet. I think my biggest one has been close to 50. I have 2 that are in the 45, 47 range.
Do you get most of your agency then, as opposed to directly soliciting clients?
Well, yeah. I mean, right now I have 2 agencies that I work with, plus the retirement income people book, but I've done some directly. I mean, I'd rather do it directly because then I have more control over it, and I have more control over how I get paid. And I don't have to deal with all the promises that the agencies make, which a lot of times they say, oh yeah, we do this, and then they don't really do it. But then I can't say that to the client, like, oh yeah, they promised you this and you're never going to get it, right? Or you're going to have to pull teeth to get it. But it's like everything else, right? So I would love to do it more directly, but I also don't necessarily want to take a lot more time to market myself than I already am, because I don't really need to. So
heck no, I mean, if I'm all about efficiency, because time is money, and if the clients are coming and I'm making good money, I don't really care where they're coming from.
I don't really care.
Do you, like, from a process standpoint, because I think I can hear a lot of our audience being like, geez, I don't even know how to construct an article at this point, let alone put a book together.
Yeah, right.
And I need to rectify that over at our programs, probably by doing a little more, here's how to write an article type of thing.
Yeah.
But do you work with a template? Is every book different? Like, to me,
Well, I
when
mean,
I was
there's a
writing,
process. Yeah, there's a process. I mean, I have my own process, and a lot of times the agencies, it's similar, but they might call it different things. So it's basically you have to define the idea, like with the author. And it's just like if
right,
you're writing an article, like what is your thesis statement? Like let's go back
exactly.
to, high school English. Like
Well,
that teacher that drove you crazy was really not crazy. They were trying to help you, right? We have
well,
to have some idea of what we're writing about, right?
this is what I tell people when they ask
Yeah.
me an RN2writer. They say, but you don't teach how to write a blog post, how to write an article,
Yeah.
how to write a white paper. I said, it's because what we teach is the only thing you need to know, which is the 5-paragraph thesis that
Yeah,
you
right.
learn in high school,
Exactly.
and you can write
It's not
everything
that
from that.
complicated. Yeah, it's not that complicated. So it's basically helping the author because people think, oh, I have a book, I can put everything in it. And I'm like, it's not the kitchen sink. It's not, or what I used to tell my students, because I actually taught undergraduates for a while. I told my students, like, if your topic is too broad, you end up trying to boil the ocean, which is impossible. And you get bogged down because your idea is too broad. And there are a lot
Right.
of ideas you think, I have a book, I have 70,000 words, but there's so many ideas that are too broad for a book. So a lot of it is helping that person figure out what we want to write about and what makes sense to put in a book, what points they're trying to make, what their audience needs to know, already knows. So once we've got kind of a direction, then we just have to put an outline together. Kind of like if you're like what I do when I'm writing an article is I say, okay, here's like, usually I'll write my 5 sentences of my introduction to the article, and then I have like my section heads, right?
Yep.
Depending on how long it is, right? And it's the same thing with a book. There's just more. There's just more points, but you still can only probably make 5 points in a chapter,
Right.
unless they're going to be like 20,000 word chapters with nobody would ever want to read.
And
So yeah, so you,
I was going to say, if people go to the bookstore and
yeah,
look at the titles of books that they may aspire to ghostwrite, you'll see that they're often very narrowly focused. It's like
yeah,
the 5-carbohydrate diet. It's not how to
yeah,
lose 100
or
pounds.
had,
It's,
yeah, or how to tame your IBS symptoms, right?
right.
The
Exactly.
IBS diet. I mean, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. So, and I think, one thing that, you and I have talked about, Beth, about your audience, and that I want you all to know who are listening to this is that you all, like, you have I would love to have a credential like you have. Like I said, I failed that part of the CPA exam. I don't have the letters after my name. It hasn't really hurt me because I have the knowledge that I gained from it. But, you don't take your credentials for granted, because a lot of healthcare writers don't have the credential. And it doesn't mean that they're not good writers, but the fact that you have the credential, you put the time in at the bedside or doing whatever it is that you've done in your healthcare career, like that is invaluable. And I would also I know that you, Beth, are going to do some other podcasts on like negotiating and contracts and things like that. But I would actually not let yourself get overwhelmed by thinking that you're not experienced. Maybe you're not an experienced freelance writer yet, but you know your stuff. Like you sweated blood, sweat, and tears to get your degree and then to work at the bedside. So in my mind, you've got 90% of what you need. What Beth is giving you is the icing on the cake to help you move your career into a different direction. And like Beth said, the sky is the limit. I mean, I'm making good money now. If I wanted to work harder, I could make more. I really don't. But my goal is to always make more money and work less. And there's no reason that you can't do that too, honestly.
No. And I think I really appreciate what you said about those credentials, nursing credentials, or we have physicians, we have veterinarians in our programs. That credential is a huge competitive advantage.
Gold.
And I see way too many nurses and other clinicians entering this profession and then wanting to like compete on price on
No,
platforms with
forget it.
people. And it's like, no, don't do that, because your value, if you don't have a single clip, or let's say you have one clip, your value as a clinician who writes is still 10 times
Yeah, because you have the
more.
experience those other people don't have. Like if I, like in, the what like I'm writing for facilities managers. There's a lot I can do, but I was never a facilities manager, right? So I can't bring, that's why I had to interview 7 facility managers to help me write this book to make sure that I was not missing it. And that's what a lot of healthcare writers who don't have the credentials have to do. They have to talk to people who've been in the field. And sometimes you have to do that if it's outside of your experience, but still, like, you've got it. So don't let these places like give you horrible contracts or beat you down. I mean, just
Right.
and be confident. You can be confident, which is what I am. Because if people, like, I saw a horrible contract like from this new agency I'm working with, and I just made them change everything. And if any point they had said they wouldn't do it, I would have said, so long. Because
Exactly.
I'm not going to indemnify them. I am
No.
not going to, whatever other horrible things that they wanted me to do. Forget it. Because I know my value, and maybe probably took me too long. It takes most of us too long, but I think with you guys and gals, you people, you have a great credential, and never underestimate the value of that ever.
So what do you think? Let's brainstorm some potential entry points or examples of the types of books nurses could ghostwrite. Like the
Right,
first thing that came to my mind was, yes, like perhaps diet titles, but
right.
there's way more than that.
Oh yeah.
Are we talking about books on the shelf, consumer books that are on the shelf at Barnes and Noble? Are we talking about books that providers are going to use to, like, plastic surgeons to elevate their
Yeah.
profile?
Totally. Totally. And there's also, who knows, like, there's probably people that would want to do like what's known now as hybrid publishing, where you don't necessarily have one of the big 5 publishers. You don't have to get an agent, but maybe like a plastic surgeon who doesn't want to go through all the baloney, isn't a big name, doesn't want to have to get an agent and go through all that. Maybe they want to do, what's used to be self-publishing now is hybrid publishing. Maybe you work with somebody writing copy for them, you know, and
Mm,
they, at one point they throw out a comment saying, I'd love to write a book, but I just don't know how to go about it. Or maybe you're working, for a hospital system freelancing, and maybe there's things that they want to publish for their audience. I don't know. Could happen. I don't know.
yeah.
I can't, right? There's all sorts of, like me with these retirement income books. Those aren't traditionally published. Hybrid publishing is huge. I mean, because
Mm,
people want to get, like, it used to be like your audience may not remember this, Beth, but you and I remember this when 20 years ago, we're all like, do I have to have a website?
yeah. Yeah.
And we didn't want to spend the money because it was expensive.
Yes.
But we thought, what? So we waited, and then we were like one of the last 5 people to get a website in the universe, and nobody cared. And books, I am convinced that is the modern equivalent is a book, because people want to know, if you're putting yourself out as an expert, where is your book? And as
Mm-hmm.
long as it doesn't look like it was published in a garage, people don't really care that it wasn't published by a big 5. They may be like, what is a big 5 publisher? I don't even know what that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That means something to people. But a lot of times if it looks good, and that's one thing I did, like the book title you sort of see in the book cover in the background,
Yeah.
that was my pandemic thing. That's what I did. When we could borrow money from the government to market our businesses.
It's right down. I'm going to point. Your book
Oh,
is
there he
right
is.
down
Yeah,
here
I see it.
on
Yeah.
my bookshelf.
So, yeah, so I borrowed $10,000 at 1.5%, and I got that book published. I mean, I had an advantage because I could write my own book, right? And it's still like, I mean, have I sold many? No, but that wasn't the point. Like, the point was visibility, right? And I'm going on a podcast at the end of this month. It's about that book that was published in 2021 that nobody
Yep.
really cares about, but it's still like a talk, get your book done in this lifetime. Basically, like, how it's sort of like what Beth is saying does with you guys, but it's also very hands-on about like how to write it, how to decide what to write, how to create your outline, how to write your chapters, what kinds of things to put in it. So yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
that's another thing you can do like for yourself. And Beth,
Mm-hmm.
you can make an ebook. It doesn't have to be a published book, but like, okay, you can make guides for your clients, like how to create healthcare content that's credible and that, you know, builds your
Yep.
reputation, right? Free little ebook download.
Yep. That's exactly what I did before I really ramped up RN2writer. I wrote
Yeah.
an ebook called The Seven Deadly Sins of Healthcare Content Writing. And
Yeah.
it was
And I did.
for audiences like
Yeah.
plastic surgeons and dermatologists and private practice places who were trying to do their own thing. What I do want to say, I want to say to everybody, if you're sitting out there thinking, man, I would love to do that, but nobody's going to hire me because I've never done a book. Remember, it's marketing is all aspirational.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what you can do, not necessarily what you have done. And this is something, Amy, you and I talked about back in
Oh
the day.
yeah.
Like we would see a trend coming and we'd throw a web page up like, we're the go-to. For me, it was
Yeah.
healthcare script writer.
I
I had
know. And
never
you're like,
written
I've
one
never done
before.
one in my life. I know.
No. And it's like, so, if people approach you and say, well, gosh, you ghostwrite books. Can you show me some work? All you have to do is say, well, let me show you some articles, but really a book is just putting a bunch of articles
Longer.
together in a certain way.
Yeah.
I can certainly do it.
Exactly.
And I'm willing to negotiate with you
Yeah.
about get my first crack at this. That's
Yeah.
okay too. You
Yeah,
know?
I have a friend who had a job for a long time and then he wanted to go out on his own. He asked me for advice. And then now he's actually does speech writing and a whole bunch of things for like higher education and associations. And he said, you know what I learned from you? And I said, what? He said, if they ask me if I could do it, just say yes. Just,
Yeah.
and I'll figure, and think in the back of my head, I'll figure it out later. It's like what I learned from you is to be confident in my own abilities.
Amen.
Because if we're not going to get anywhere, right? I mean, we're just going to be, and we want to, you're doing this because you want to change your life. It's not just about changing your job. It's about changing your life and your family's life.
And honestly, for nurses, a lot of it is about helping other people.
Yeah, of
And
course.
everything we do, and a lot of times I think when nurses conceptualize this, they're thinking about helping consumers, helping the general public. And that's
Right.
true, we do that, but you're also helping your clients.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
work you're producing for your clients, including if it's a ghostwritten book, that is ultimately going to help people too.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's why this is such a great career for nurses to do on the side if they want some extra money or make it their full-time job. You can help so many more people doing this, really.
Well, yeah. And I've had so many people I've written books for, they're so grateful because the book would never happen if they didn't have help. And some of it, a lot of it, and what I wrote in that book back there, a lot of it, they need accountability, right? They need somebody to, if they're trying to write it themselves, a lot of the reason it can't get done, and I put this on my website, is people like, well, I could write it myself. And I say in my FAQs, like, have you? Have you?
Exactly.
Where is it? Right? Because it's a big thing. And so, people need help. And then they're so grateful because they're, this is a dream for a lot of people to have a book, right? It's a legacy, right? Not just to get more business, but also like, oh, my kids and my grandkids will like know why I did what I'm doing, and for me, I don't have the healthcare mission, but I still feel, that I have a mission driven business. In my case, it's to demystify a lot of this financial stuff that people find so confusing, or, that experts want to help people, but they just don't know how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I want to tell everybody last thing, and then we've got to wrap this up. I mean,
Yeah.
this time flies when
I
we're
know,
having
it's
such
been
a good
great,
conversation. Everybody who's listening, if you want a master class in how to write and construct a website, head over to lakeeffectcreative.com because, man, did you do the copywriting on that yourself, Amy?
No, I actually hired somebody to, And this was a long time ago. This person you can't even hire her anymore. Her name's Laura Belgray, and she wrote, like, she's a millionaire now. She's charging $900 an hour. And a friend of mine she's like, you got to hire, because, sometimes it's hard to write your own stuff.
Oh.
So I spent 3 hours with her, and I loved that copy. So I just kept it.
Yeah, that copy is a masterclass. And so nobody copy it, but use it for inspiration for writing your own writer website. Well, gosh, Amy, this has been fantastic. For everybody who's listening, we will find some resources for ghostwriting agencies and put them in the show notes. We will also have a link to Amy's website in the show notes. Lastly, I want to add, we do actually offer a book authoring 101 course or video training that talks about both self-publishing and traditional publishing and how to get started. So y'all can head to the RN2writer storefront to check that out. Amy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on. We should do it again, really, because
it's fun. There's a lot to talk about.
1,000 things to talk about, really. Yes. So, all right. Thank you all for listening, and we'll be back. So that's it for this episode of the RN2writer Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Haynes. I'm a nurse, but I made my living as a freelance writer. Hey, tell us what you thought of this episode by posting in the comments on YouTube. You also can email us if you'd like, and you can send us suggestions for shows you'd like to see. Once again, don't forget to expand the description box on YouTube to locate links to any resources I may have mentioned in this episode. And you can also follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, keep pitching.